No, that's,
We're getting a bumper from.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, 75, wasn't it? He was late in 75. So it's a little different.
I have got things at my house that I need to get to you.
Okay.
I'm trying to plan so if something goes wrong, I can take care of business today.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll have to look it up.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
It is 6 o'clock.
Are you recording?
We're recording.
Before we get started, I'm going to ask Dr. Fletcher to say a word of prayer.
Okay, please bow your heads, please. Most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, dear Lord and Savior, we come to you tonight again being thankful for all that you do for us, Lord, and most of all for your Son, Jesus. We're also thankful for the opportunity to have to serve the students of Lawrence County, Lord. We pray for your guidance and wisdom in each decision that we make. Lord, I also want to pray for those in our families that may be sick or maybe going through tough times. Lord, we pray for your healing hand for each. Again, we just ask that you be with us as we make decisions tonight. We pray that it will benefit each student in Lawrence County. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Call the Lawrence County Board of Education special meeting to order. Our mission is all in for building relationships through personalized learning that inspires, challenges, and equips each student to dream, to persist, and to succeed. Would everybody please stand for the pledge of flag?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll give it a.
2 is student learning and support services. 2A is the consent agenda. We have a few items on the consent agenda tonight, Dr. Fletcher.
Just those 3 items that are mentioned, the claims order of the treasurer, there's fundraisers, and then also the per diem for each member.
I'll give everybody a chance to look at those that we just received.
As far as the claims and orders, just a reminder, there is we've talked about this several times, but I just want to keep the board members reminded that we are doing a contract with a gentleman that is taking care of us as far as the sewer plant consulting. So that $4,000 that this gentleman will guarantee will be in accordance with all requirements. So that's been great for us so far, so I just want to remind everyone of that. Other items on there, we do have some, just the day-to-day operations of the building. I don't see anything that's out of the order.
Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion.
Johnny makes a motion. Do we have a second? Jim seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. 2B, construction projects. 2B1 is the softball facilities athletic upgrades. LCHS BG 22147. Ross Thornton and Associates is here to discuss it. Dr. Fletcher, do you have anything to begin with?
Yeah, before we start, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight is really about a couple of things. One, we've had a lot of discussion on our softball facility. So some of the things we'd like to get accomplished tonight is one is to finalize the actual site. We've talked about 2 different sites for this facility. One site is behind the first base dugout, which we understand causes a little more cost. But the other site would be the one in between beside the concession stand there by the football field. So one, we'd like to get that nailed down, if you will, about what we will do about where that facility will be placed. Now that'll come after we talk about some of the designs and the costs, so we'll give the opportunity for our architect to talk about that. Mr. Brookshire's here with Mr. Bard. The other items there's 3 different designs we've talked about, and the board has been very focused on trying to stay within budget. So what can we do to stay within that budget? And if we don't stay within the budget, we need to talk about financing, and that's where we have Ross Sinclair, Representative Mr. Lincoln Finer here, to talk about the possible, if we need to budget more, but also I want him to talk to you about our bonding potential regardless of our decision of the new facility. The other 2 items that we're going to, again, this is a lot of construction tonight, deals with our safety and security projects. We do have some good news. We're going to get by with our camera system project at $10,000 less, so that's great news. And also too, of course, the big project, we want to make sure we get our architect agreement approved tonight, and that has been reviewed by our attorney. So again, tonight's a lot about construction, and that's what we're here for. And if it's okay with the board chair, I will turn it over to, I'd like for the gentleman to talk about the three different options that we've talked about for that facility if possible.
Hold on one second. Do you all have option 1 and 2 and 3, or just option 1 and 2? I've only got 1 and 2, and I'm missing 3.
We've got some colored floor plans that Remington can share. I think we've got 4 copies, so maybe we can let you all share some.
I think we've got that.
If you look at this copy, this has the three different options on it. Now, as
But
far
we
as
don't have
cost,
breakdown.
yeah, they'll have to break down costs for us a little bit better. We have option one, option two, I believe.
Yeah, we don't have
But
option.
those are the three options there as far as cost.
I'm Randy Brookshire, Remington Bar, Donnie Crane. Donnie Crane is a mechanical, electrical engineer with CMTA. Remington and I are with Ross Tarrant. First of all, we're glad to be here tonight, and look forward to our conversations. This first project we're talking about is a softball field. As Dr. Fletcher said, or softball building, as Dr. Fletcher said, we've had several conversations and discussions about that. The BG1 that's currently on the books and on record with KDE is for the smaller version, which is option 3, which was that 50 by 72 foot version. And we were asked to look at a couple of other options, and that's option 2, and then option 1, with option 1 being the largest of those facilities at 50 feet wide by 100 feet long, and that's a 5,000 square foot building. That's the option that seems to satisfy the most needs as far as providing both the practice indoor area with the batting cages and also some of the other amenities such as the team space, and then the restrooms that would serve the public, a small facility that would serve the team, and then a concessions building. And Dr. Fletcher said one of the other things that we were looking at was the options for the site. The original version, the smaller one, which was the 50 by 72, which is actually option 3 on the floor plan, was sited adjacent to the existing softball facility, and between that facility and the existing restroom concession stand that serves the football. And that's about the maximum size building you can fit in that space with those two buildings there. So that's getting really close to both of those buildings. So we're looking at the larger building. We're also looking at the site that's on the first baseline of the softball field. Now that site does present some additional challenges. The first site up adjacent to the existing softball facility is a relatively flat site, as you know. So site development costs were pretty minimal. And looking at this other site location, there's a bit of a ravine there, a ditch line that goes through there, and there's some fill that's going to be required to bring that up and create a proper building path for the building. And we're proposing to bring that building up to approximately the same elevation as the softball field, so that we can get good ADA handicap access to that facility, so the restrooms and the concession stand can be accessed without trying to incorporate a ramp or a stair, which would just be additional. Now, because of the larger building and the site, the cost that you all are looking at that looks like this as a breakdown is.
We don't have that. That's what we need to have.
Okay, I think there's just got copies of that too.
We have the option 1 and option 2, but we don't have option 3.
That was the original BG1 cost. And that was the least,
Yeah, I don't.
cost.
Let's see. I've got option 1 and option 2. I don't have the other breakdown that we were just looking at.
Yeah, we're bringing that to you fresh tonight.
Okay.
Remington's got copies.
Yeah, he's bringing it.
Remington, you have it.
Let,
Can you make copies of this?
No, I don't have a code.
we can double up a little
Oh,
Put one at each table, and we'll double up, look.
Remington, you have my copy if you want.
Let me go with each table.
Okay.
This is the new, this is that.
So this is a revised updated estimate after we had had a conversation last week about this. And we've gone back through and looked at options on how to bring this cost down because we were looking at a project cost of $700,000 or so plus. And so we've been looking at tweaking some things, refining our numbers. Remington has some of that detail that we can kind of go through as far as some of the information that we're looking to cut out of the cost for the phase one project. As a minimum, we feel like HPC, and we're going to confirm this, is going to require a restroom facility in the building just to achieve an occupancy. So one of the ideas that we're looking at is roughing in everything, building a shell, and then allowing the district to be able to come back and do some fit up of the interior of the building as far as plumbing, walls, etc. As part of kind of a future phase that would be accomplished at a later date. I'm just going to run into detail about the cost.
So this option one is comparable with the previous option one that you all have. This is a revised number that we put together with our consultants. The main number you'll see revised that we have here is
There's
We've only got one for each phase. We've got.
So that top number we were looking at, that is what was previously the $190,000 number. We've gone back, looked at the site. We incorporate a lot of kind of safety nets into this price. So part of that original price that we gave was a number for what we deem as unsuitable soils. So we carry typically through our design process a number for unsuitable soils in the instance that the geotechnical report that we don't have back yet shows that we have unsuitable soils to build on. So we pulled that allowance out and kind of divvied it up into the design contingency at the bottom. So you're no longer seeing that number at that top part. We've also reduced some of the storm drainage that's coming off of the building and changed that to where majority will spill to grade and just go through downspouts and gutters. And then there is a low spot that's going to require a kind of a drain basin that we've not been able to get away with the site at the softball field. That's really how that first number's been reduced down. We really came back and polished all of our site numbers as much as we could. And this is really what we're comfortable with, that softball site over there and what the cost to develop. I will mention there's also all of the concrete we're talking about, minus the concrete that would be placed on the third base line, is also included in this 100 to 500 amount. So all the concrete we're talking about that would be needed around the building for doors and then to connect to the existing concourse is also included in that 102 number. When you look down at the foundation / slab and the gravel only line items there, what we've done is anticipated that a portion of this building will be left without a floor slab for some amount of time until the district comes back in and wants to fit up that area. So we've been able to pull out a little bit of cost that we would spend on the floor slab and save, roughly $6,000 to just put in gravel and allow for the building to be fit up at a later date. We've really reduced the architectural and interior scope. It's also something we feel can be fit up quite easily. We've kept some numbers for exterior doors, which are not easy to put into a pre-engineered metal building at a later date. So we feel you're going to want to do those up front. And then some minor interior finishes to kind of just button up the part of the building that gets occupied. We've also reduced the mechanical, plumbing, and electric costs. Like Randy mentioned, we're going to need one restroom facility. This number that you got here is really to get the plumbing there, the fixtures for that, and that's about it. The rest of that would need to come at a later date. Then you have the mechanical and electrical. We approached the heating facility as needing heating but not cooling. You know, that's pretty common for this type of batting cage. The doors can be open in spring, that kind of thing. We do this a lot with just unit heaters. We feel very comfortable with that $18,000 for that number. Then we've got the electrical. The building can't be occupied without electrical. We weren't really able to come off of that cost much. We're talking power and the general lighting, and all of that still has to go in when the building gets built to be able to occupy it. Now there is some reduction there. We won't need as many lights, won't need as many outlets up front, that kind of thing. So we feel that, you know, 50,000 is kind of a good number for where we're at with that one. The lump sum at the bottom there is a line item that we've included for the third base line. That's what it's going to take over there to make your third base line connect to your parking lot and allow for ADA access to the softball field. We were able to reduce that a little bit with some more accurate numbers, so that's been cut a little bit.
So what you see there is a subtotal of $387,000. As we mentioned previously, we're at early schematic design, so we typically would carry a contingency. That's also where we have shown that if we do have unsuitable soils, that needs to come out of that number. And then what we've also applied is a 15%, which is pretty typical for a general contractor overhead profit to that number. And so looking at a total construction cost of $483,820 for the building. And then, so that's the construction cost. And then in order to get to a project cost, there's soft cost. And we have, just to put a 20% factor on that, KD requires you to carry a 10% contingency regardless. And then there's other costs that are that number, like the site survey, like the geotechnical, like the design fees, you know, submitting to HPC to get the permit. Those type of costs will come out of that soft cost number. So we're looking at a project cost in the red, or at least on my copy, of $580,575, which equates to $138.60 a square foot for a 5,000 square foot building. So this is, you know, this is kind of getting the bare bones as far as getting the building pad prepared, and getting the site prepared, and getting the building shell primarily there, and be able to be occupied with some systems that then will allow for some future flexibility as far as being able to fit that space out the way that you want it to. So we're getting plumbing, power, other utilities to the building, getting an occupancy permit, and then you know, the rest of that space as far as developing the team meeting room, the concession space, the full public 2 restrooms, and the team restroom would potentially be part of the fit up that the district would look to do at a future date.
Well,
Questions?
before we get started, I'm may do something unusual, but I'm gonna ask our softball coach to come up here, and that way we can talk to him and ask him what, you know, he thinks of everything, what he would like to see. Coach, is the 50 by 100, is that the building that you were looking at, or the 50 by 72? We've seen a couple different options.
Well, we originally started with 50 by 72, but as things evolved, we looked at that 50 by 100
Okay.
to give more options as far as restrooms and stuff closer to site. And if I understand from some of our other meetings that those restrooms would have to be closer than our existing ones if you build another building on site. So I think that gave us an opportunity to fit those, you know, the disabilities issues, all that inside that one structure,
Okay.
versus if you put the smaller one, all that's not going to fit.
You, I don't know, I don't think you've seen all this, but, or maybe you have, I don't know. I know this is gypsum ceilings. What do you have there? Is that just for the bathroom area or locker room area?
That would be for the bathroom.
Bathroom area, okay. And it's, I think interior walls you were having, like just plywood? Is that on the outskirt of the wall, or is that for the interior wall?
That would just be, you know, whether we get to one interior wall, we'll have a couple of them, it would be as basic as can get. We cost off of a metal stud and, you know, 2 layers of gel.
Okay.
That's it, pretty common.
Is there anything that you would like to see, Coach, on this building that, you know, you'd like to tell the board of what you'd like to see? I know you want to get a building, you know, and is there anything that you would like to see, or is this something you want to just try to get up and then we'll get it going?
Well, I think that for the overall project, the 50 by 100 would be, give us so much more options. Now, at what point you finish it to now, you know, I'm totally at discretion what you guys decide to do. I'm not pushing for any one stage of completion. But I do know that with the bigger facility, it just accommodates so much more. That's would be my biggest concern. And I don't know, without seeing that paper you're looking at, there's also some options as far as, I know they wouldn't have filled all that up, but, you know, there's also options there too that we can still look at, but I don't know how much of that practice football field the board would even consider, you know, if you just turned it one direction, you know, without having a bunch of work done in there as far as filling all that up. But then again, that's up to you guys, y'all have to decide that.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we had was, me personally, and I'm not speaking for the board at all, they can speak at any time, but I didn't want it over on the opposite side of your locker room, because then I was afraid it would become a visitor's football locker room. And I don't want that. I want it to be a girls' building, an all-girls building, and for you all to use. So that kind of puts it in your room instead of the football room, you know,
Right.
and get it over on your side. That was the biggest issue for me.
You know, and I appreciate that. I mean, we've always been able to manage to work it out. And there is some difficulties that come with sharing a facility with boys.
Yeah.
You know, there's just some issues with that, you know, without getting into those. But that being said, I'm also very appreciative that we've had what we got. You know, we got a lot more than most have, so when you consider something like this, to me, it's almost, you know, I've been here a long time, you know, and we've worked through everything, and I've never tried to, anything we've gotten, we've tried to work for. And without the help of the board, there's just no way that I would ever think, this is almost like a dream, it's not like real. You know, I've been here since 2005, and I'm Lawrence County through and through. I think you guys know that. I've turned down colleges and such just to be here because I'm committed to Lawrence County kids. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to be considered something like this myself.
Well, again, I think we've said it, the whole board has said it several times, we don't want you all just to have enough, we want you to have the best, and that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Anybody?
Yeah, that would be, I mean, that'd be amazing. I don't know, it'd be hard to even imagine just not having to call Travis every day, you know. And he's been great, you know, we work it out, you know, shuffling times around to get in the baseball. Well, they call it the baseball building. That's not the baseball. It's the Lawrence County building, I guess. But you know, to work things out, that building would also relieve pressure from football. It would relieve pressure from baseball, basketball. Everybody uses that facility down there, and it's primarily most of the time shuffled between baseball and softball team. And if you can, it could open up some more avenues for other people to use it too, I think.
Yeah, I think this will give us a girls' facility and a boys' facility for right now. I mean, you can break it down to that. I know you wouldn't mind the girls' basketball coming down and using it if they needed to or something like that. And I think we give us a girls' facility and a boys' facility.
Can I ask a question? You were talking about the, doing some, on the interior, doing a little bit more like gravel as opposed to concrete. Would there be concrete, I'm assuming there'd be concrete under the hitting area?
Yes.
And then the other would be more of a gravel rough that we need to finish out ourselves at a later date?
That's what we were assuming, and that coincides with the underslide plumbing. Like if we got the sanitary line to the building and installed a toilet, and we would leave that portion of the building as a gravel, space, so that in the future, the underslab plumbing could be extended, and you could install those additional restrooms in the concession stand, because that concession stand is gonna need plumbing as well.
Would the locker area, would the locker area include, is that included in the slab of the original? Or
No, there's, only thing that's included in the slab price for this, that you're looking at there is the heating area and the first closest restroom. Everything else will be gravel.
So that is something that we, at a later date, if we finish, we have.
About a third would be left gravel, and 2/3 would be, concrete, approximately.
What does the greatest cost if you put concrete?
I think that was about a $6,000 difference if you just went ahead and concreted the whole thing.
But if you put the concrete in now, you'd want to put the.
Yeah, you want to put the slab.
But then I think that's the question too. I mean, we got that question, if we have to do one restroom, we're gonna have to do rough and plumbing anyway. We just don't have to extend it all the way around, but you're not talking about tremendous amount if that's what we're gonna have to do.
This is true. Yes.
So, I mean, you're talking about for another 15 grand or something, you probably get the slab and the rest of the plumbing in.
Sounds about right.
So, roughly. You're talking 6,000, yeah, you're talking 6,000 concrete. Well,
So if you got everything concrete, rough in, then you're looking at such a
Roughly speaking, yeah, you'd be looking at about a $600,000 project.
and that is with the $40,000 contingency
Correct.
and $100,000 in fees.
Not with fees, the KD.
Yeah, no, I'm
All the
not
soft
saying this year, but it's $100,000 to build a building, you know?
Right.
If I may, I do, I fully understand this is a board decision, but to me, it would be more sensible to just, if it's just $20,000, to go ahead and just build it.
I agree with that.
reason for that, sure.
We were looking, you know, I talked to these gentlemen, we were talking back and forth, about how to, I think this is our biggest issue. We have roughly 400,000, maybe.
Ms. Van Ness, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've budgeted 400,000 out of general fund, is correct? So if we
And does
did
that complete our construction account also?
No.
No, so we have a little bit of money left over our construction account that we could possibly use, and that's what we talked about as our backup money a little bit. So we do have a little bit of money there, so how do we get it into that budget? I think that's the point. If we don't, we've got to figure out a way to get more money, and we have another gentleman here that's gonna talk about that. But at this point, I mean, I wanna get the building going.
At this point, we're pretty close.
We're pretty close. We're pretty close, and I want to get the building going. I think there is still some areas that we can save at. I think if we get into the bid process, that we may see some areas that we're going to save a little bit here and there. I think we, you know, possibly in some electrical, possibly in some plumbing, especially if we have some local people that do some bidding on it. I think that'll drive some of the costs down. We've got a shot to get some of the costs down. Even the concrete, I think maybe, we have some local people that decide to come in on the concrete. So, the biggest thing is I want to get it going. So what does it take to get it going? I mean, I think everybody's here ready to get it going. We've talked about it a lot. What do we need to do? Even though we don't have this money budgeted, what do we need to do to start the process?
And that's really why we have Mr. Finer here. If we want to go over a $400,000 budget, you're basically looking at $200,000 in bonding. So when you look at the $200,000 in bonding, that's what Mr. Finer's here to speak about. Now, again, you know, you look at all three options, we all agree that option 3 is, you know, I think Coach has said pretty well. I think he'll walk out there with a tear in his eye if we get that third option, because that is the big, You know, we started off, and for transparency, we started off with we started off with option 3, and we talked about option 2 and option 1. Option 1 would be great for a girls program. Option 2 would be great for a girls program. Option 3 would be great, but we want to look at locker room, that we're going to have to look at bonding some other money. Okay? And Mr. Steiner, would you care to talk about that?
Sure. I'm in the business of selling bonds, but I think the news that I'm going to present to you is that you've got some cash left over this fiscal year. And Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong along the way. It's actually going to be cash that's left over that after you make your bond payments for this current fiscal year, there's a mechanism that will allow you to convert those funds. They're very heavily restricted for facilities purposes. But KDE allows, it's called the Capital Funds Request Process, allows for you to access those dollars for certain items. So we've been through this before, but we'll just dig in. Page 1 you guys are familiar with. Each column represents the principal and interest payments on your outstanding bond issues. If you jump to the far right-hand column G,
What page is that? I'm sorry.
on page 1.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the far right-hand column G. And we'll skip the fiscal year 21 row. You'll see in fiscal year 22, the sum of all of your existing bond payments, $429,712. And of course, if we look on farther down that column, you'll see that number decreases as more of your bonds get paid down. On page 2 are your various sources of revenue that you have to make those bond payments. The most familiar, of course, column B is your local nickel, 5 cents per $100 of assessed property value. I'm looking at the fiscal year 22 row. Based on current assessments, your local nickel brings in $440,678. Column D, your capital outlay, simply $100 per unit of average daily attendance. For bond projection purposes, I'm only able to show 80% of that number, which is $179,854. The other 20% is held back. It's really there and available. So I really need to update that number because if you look at the very bottom footnote, your ADA as KDE, as reported to KDE or by KDE, is $2,248. So if I take that number times $100 per unit of ADA, the actual amount is $224,817. So column D, there's actually $222,817. Now that we know you're not going to be issuing any more new bonds that would have payments coming in fiscal year 22, then you can go back and access that 20% reserve because it wasn't needed. So let me keep moving on. But yeah, column D should actually be $222,000. Column E, the equalization or nickel match, represents $588,987. Column H just simply backs out the bond payments that are currently on the books that we've seen on page 1. And so as we follow fiscal year 22, as we follow that row all the way over to the far right-hand column N, you see $779,807. That is cash that is not necessary to cover your bond payments during this fiscal year. 22, that's correct, right. So even if you had, well, in a second I'm going to show you that your bonding capacity is $17 million. Even if you had that shovel-ready project ready to issue bonds tomorrow on, there would be no principal or interest payments on that bond issue that would go on your books for fiscal year 22. So fiscal year 22 is pretty much, we already know we already know what the sum of the payments necessary is gonna be, and we know what's gonna be left over. And it's really that 779,807 plus about 40,000, that I had to hold back at capital outlay. So over $800,000 of restricted building fund cash that could be, I say repurposed because this project, your restricted building funds have to be used on a priority 1 through 4 on your facility plan. This project is seen as discretionary by KDE and is a category 5. So the only way that we can use these restricted revenues and apply them towards a discretionary category 5 project is through the process called the capital fund request. As long as, and there's a one-page form. The process would be to take your existing BG1 that I think has a $400,000 amount on it, and just list in, it would be described as building fund cash. There'd be a line item that says building fund cash. If you wanted to add another $300,000 to it, you would simply add building fund cash to that BG, submit the one-page capital funds request. Don't shoot the messenger, but KDE's process is they immediately reject that back and say, we cannot approve this until this other section of the department approves your capital funds request, which is basically a rubber stamp. But the process is there, the cash is there. I see no reason that you couldn't apply any amount of that cash that you wanted. Definitely wouldn't recommend, yeah.
So you're saying that we can use this money towards an athletic project?
Yes, through the capital fund request process, which should be fairly painless, but just a heads up, it probably would get rejected the first time, just because you've got the folks in finance and you've got the folks that approve capital fund requests, and it can't make its way into their inbox over here, the ones that approve capital funds requests, until it first shows up over here and gets rejected. It's a process to go through all the time. Any district that does the capital fund request, most districts do use the capital fund request. I would also say these monies, if they're not used, that $700,000 will roll over until next year. And then in the odd number years, any dollars that are left over unspent are forced to be escrowed for a future SFCC project. The SFCC has to be a priority 1 project, so it's sort of, in your case, you probably have good use for it. You'll have a priority 1 project coming down the pipe, but sometimes it does get trapped. Any money's there at the end of an odd number year gets trapped and is forced to be put in escrow for your next project that uses SFCC dollars, which has to be a priority 1.
So you're saying that it is a good idea to go ahead and do this?
To use that cash, certainly, instead of issuing, again, I'm in the business of selling bonds, but cash is king, and you do have that cash with no other purpose. Well, not necessary for bond payments. So it's there, and you definitely don't have.
Explain to us.
But this doesn't hurt your bonding potential?
It does not, and let's we can that's gonna be the next page we can show. Yeah.
But let me just explain to us, just so we know, where does $800,000 come from? Is this money that we're not paying in bonds now, or is this money that we've already paid in bonds that is the extra?
Good question. So the $800,000 is going to be, if you add up the $440,000 in column B from your local nickel that you get from your local tax base, and then if you add the column D, I'm just going to use the $179,000 there that comes as part of the SEEK formula, the $100 per student. If you add that, and then if you add the $588,000 of equalization that you get from SEEK formula, you've got a total from those 3 revenue sources, the nickel, the capital outlay, and the nickel match, you have $1.2 million that comes in as revenue. The only thing going out is in column H. The sum of the bond payments, $429,000. So with no other bond payments that could be added, even if you issued bonds today, you're left with a surplus of $800,000 this year.
But what I'm saying, this is money that should be in our account. We're just not paying it to the bonds now.
It is, Randy, it should already be, yeah, you should have received this through the SEEK formula. It's already in I'm pretty sure it's already in a local account.
So this is just where we've done good about paying our bonds,
Yeah.
and now we're $400,000 less in bond payments. And we've done well in other aspects too, but that's really where we're at. So this is our money, we're just gonna have to spend it on bonds right now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you didn't issue bonds next year, same thing, there would be another 780 available for.
And then that would be escrow in the future project.
Right.
So I guess my question is, if that money is going to be escrowed in the future projects, how does that not hurt our bonding potential?
That is a good question. Yes. So let's turn to page.
But I mean, if you don't put the money in the bank,
You're
it's
right.
not going to be there for the future.
You're right. So on page 3, this is your current bonding potential as of today. Column C shows a total principal amount of $17 million. Now, to Dr. Fletcher's point, if you didn't use that $800,000 for anything, at some point in the future, you would be able to fill out a BG1 for a future project and you could have $17 million paid from bonds plus that $800,000 cash. So if you look at it that way, it does reduce future funds, but it doesn't reduce your future bonding capacity. It would reduce the total amount.
The total dollar amount.
The total dollar amount, right. So your maximum bonding capacity on page 3 of 17 million, the first bond payment would be fiscal year 23. Yeah, if you wanted to save that cash up, and you know, if let's say you weren't going to issue bonds for a future project for 3-4 years, you could add that $700,000 each year for 4 years, squirrel it away as cash to be added to that future project.
And we don't have to use it all, correct?
You do not, no.
So we can use a couple $100,000 or however we want to do it.
Yeah, because whatever your future project is that uses your 17 million is probably going to be a priority 1 project or a highest priority project anyway. So any amount of that 800,000 this year that you don't use, it's not a use it or lose it scenario. And when I say it gets trapped, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it would be trapped for a future priority 1 project, which would probably be anything that you guys would be considering.
Okay. So you used $200,000 of it this year,
Right.
or 22, to do this project. The remaining amount, you spoke about future odd years. That adds to that next odd year?
Exactly. So of the 800,000, if you only used 200 of it,
Yeah.
there would be 600 still in your local account
Right.
that rolls forward and would be added to,
And whatever the bonding differential is for that particular period of time, it adds to it.
all things considered, if we didn't issue any other new bonds.
Yeah.
Let's look on page 2, column I. Page 2, column I, and I'm going to jump down to the 2023 row. So in 2023, if we add up those 3 revenue sources, in column G, we have another $1,209,000 coming in. And without all things considered, or all things constant, if we don't have any significant new bond issues, you're paying out column H $427. So in fiscal year 23, You've got, column I, road 23, roughly another 780,000. So the 600 that would be left from this year, being an even year, would roll forward and would be added to that 781 next year. At the end of 23, your auditor would say, you take the 781 plus the 600, it has to be put in a separate account that can only be used on a priority one project. So it doesn't go away, it just is more heavily restricted.
That's what I was getting at. It accumulates as it comes, as you go down or go forward.
And you can only do a capital fund request to access it before it gets tracked or before it gets moved over to that
So
escrow.
your funding potential remains at that, or actually it grows.
You're-
Bonding
In
potential doesn't
the
grow.
future, your bonding potential is going, because you're going to pay all of it.
Yeah.
So it's going to grow,
Right.
however much it's going to grow.
And
But
you
then you still have this reserve side that you can pull from for,
Yeah.
capital projects.
for capital fund request discretionary projects until the odd number year when it gets restricted for part. Yeah, and I mean, you guys have been great stewards of that money because, to be completely honest, I mean, I say this respectfully because every district has to do what they have to do. But there's some districts where when I present bonding potential, I first have to make sure, are you dependent on that money for pay insurance on buses? And there's a list. It's become a lot more restrictive on how you can use that leftover money. But there's some districts that absolutely have to have that leftover money. And in your case, it's encouraging because when the time comes when we do max out your bonding capacity, that leftover goes away, and you guys have kind of been living without use of it already.
So this, it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Well, I guess we do, maybe Brandy can answer that. Do we need that extra? And the way I look at it is we're saving $400,000, so we have $400,000 to play with, even though we have 800. But, is that something at the end of the year we're gonna have to use, Brandy? I guess that would be a question for you guys. Are we gonna need that for insurance or whatever else that we can use that money for?
I mean, this year we used our ARPA ESSER to cover our insurance, which is why we have this $400,000 that we have to play with. That's why we have that this year for that.
Typically, that comes out of our general fund.
That comes right out of our general fund normally every year. That's why we have it this year.
So that's kind of why I started alignment on this project, I think. You can't see me smiling, but I'm smiling. So we use the ESSER and we pay everything off. We have $400,000 for this project, and we're gonna save $400,000 next year just on bond payments. Correct? Almost 400, not quite. 396, huh?
I didn't follow that part. We're saving $400,000 on bond payments.
Yeah, because we paid, in this year, we paid $825,000, next year we're paying $429.
Yes, exactly.
So we're saving $400,000.
Because bonds rolled off in 21, you're right.
However you wanna fund it, however you wanna take it out of what fund, we're saving $400,000.
You've got a lot more left over this fiscal year than you had left over last fiscal year because you paid bonds down.
Yeah.
And it works that way going forward too.
Yes. Even though we can access 800,000 next year, we're saving 400. And just to point out, in 2024, we save another couple $100,000.
Right.
So we're getting close on our bonds, we're getting down there.
Yeah.
So 2022 and 2024 are our biggest bond years, for reduction of cost.
But now on page 3, my 17 million factors in all that.
Yes.
If you issued 17 million on page 3, again, I'm traditionally conservative. I've used high interest rates. In column K on the right, this is what would be left over if you issued 17 million today. I've held back 75,000 just to be conservative in case full day kindergarten gets taken away. Again, it seems to be positive movement that it'll continue to be funded, but I'm holding back. While we're at it, if I can move on forward and just touch on.
Yeah.
One more thing.
Sure.
What if the legislature changes the amount per student?
capital outlay is still $100 per student, correct?
Yeah, the capital outlay is still $100 per student. I mean,
If they change the seat form, it's gonna be related to ADM and ADA more than likely, so you're not looking at, I mean, they could always change how much they give you per student for capital outlay, but it's been $100 for how long?
25 years since basically since Karen.
Okay. So on this, so you're saying that after 2024 even, our bonding capability is gonna be 17 million?
So on, on page 3, yeah, so on page 3, if you look at column F, the total principal plus interest of this hypothetical 17 million, you'll see that the amount jumps up from, the bonds are structured, the bonds that would be issued, the 17 million are structured that the total principal plus interest in fiscal year 23 is 832,000, and then it jumps up a couple $100,000 there in 24. So it's already reaching out and grabbing the extra revenue that comes online as you pay stuff off. It kind of all wraps around.
But in 2024, what do you think, or what would you think would be of the bond?
If you did not issue bonds in fiscal year 23 and waited another year,
Yeah.
you're going to, just ballparking, it's only going to go up safely roughly $1 million. Because each year you roll forward. If I look all the way down to the very bottom, fiscal year 2042, you don't have any debt on your books in fiscal year 42. I know that you've got 1,250,000 or so of revenue coming online each year. I'm getting into the weeds, but roughly $1 million a year, the longer you wait. So
We'll be close to getting closer to 20 million by 2024.
getting closer, we don't know what interest rates are going to be.
Yeah.
Now, if full-day kindergarten, once we learn that, I can come back and tell you, in January, February, that your current bond potential may be closer to 18 and a half, if we wait until
2024.
Yeah, I mean, you're still bumping it. It'd be very hard to get above 20 in any scenario.
Even in 2024, when we go down another $200,000 in bond payments? Because we're
That's already
finishing
been rolled in column F on page 3.
Yeah, I got you there.
The sum of principal plus interest in 23 is only 832, but it's already structured to increase by 200,000 in 2024
Yeah.
because it knows I know that your bond payments are going to go down 200,000, so I've structured this new bond issue to already capture that and use it.
Okay. Well, we're all looking at, we want to build a school too.
Oh, I know.
So, the $20 million in 2024, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. I mean, you're bonding, short of saving up that cash for several years, $800,000 a year would certainly add up. That would be the way to juice your bonding capacity. Not juice your bonding capacity, but have some cash to add to it.
Yeah, your spending capacity.
Spending capacity,
Yeah.
right. While we're talking bonding capacity, though, on page 4. On page 4, I have added in column C the additional revenue that would show up if you successfully passed a recallable nickel. So that's going to add an additional $440,678. If you if you immediately and successfully passed that recallable nickel, the hope would be that it was equalized, and in column F, unfortunately, the earliest that it could be equalized would be in January the legislative session of January 24, ending something crazy like last year. So, and then at that time, if tradition continues, they would only equalize it at 25% for the first 2 years. That's why in column F, it only shows 147,000 for fiscal years 25 and 26 before it jumps up to full equalization. On page 5, I realized that I forgot to print my summary page, so may have to write down some numbers if you would. 29 million would be the maximum if you levied the recallable nickel and it was equalized. So of that, we know we're at 17 million today. For planning purposes, the one thing we can plan on for sure is that if you successfully pass a recallable nickel, that revenue is immediately available to you for bond projection purposes. You can run with it even before you get equalization. And that number is six and a half million. So 17 today plus 6.5 if the recallable is successful. And then the hope, the expectation that an additional 5.5 would come online through nickel match or equalization.
You did do a summary page on page 6. You did do it on page 6.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So the bonding potential without the nickel is 17 million, with the nickel is 29 million. But does this include the cash spending also? For this extra money at the end of the year?
It does not. So in full disclosure, your current project for security vegetables is 460,000. I need to subtract that out. So let's say 16.5 and 28.5. Is that is the current project, the bonds are getting ready to be sold.
Okay, I was under the understanding that when we did this security, it didn't hurt our bonding potential.
Use it or lose it.
It was use it or lose it, and it was from, so on page 6.
It's from the SFCC
It's
offer.
from the SFCC.
Offer from before, if we didn't use that SFCC offer, we would lose it. We was under the understanding that that had no impact whatsoever on our bonding potential. So that should stay at 17 million, 29 million, because, I mean, well, really, that should be 16.5 and 28.5 right off the bat, right?
It should be, yes.
Because we're gonna lose that money regardless.
It was going to be gone regardless. I have showed it as, it's included here, so I just didn't, I needed to make a subtract out the 460.
So essentially, our bonding potential is $16,500,000 roughly.
Correct.
Without the nickel tax. With the nickel tax, it's going to be $28,500,000.
Yes.
But regardless, we lost that money no matter what.
If you didn't use it, it would have been gone. Yes. Right, back to your question. The 800,000 of cash left over is certainly not included in the summary page anywhere.
Well, getting back to the facility. We know, we've talked about it for a long time. We know, I think we know that we want to get it done. Does anybody have any, does anybody have any, questions or comments that they need to ask right now to make, help make a decision? And then I'm going to talk to Fletcher. Do you have a issue with us, using 200,000 from this to get this project going? I personally believe that we're going to save some money. I'm going to personally push you all to save some money. Think we can do it, get all concrete rough in, after 600,000 or less. But that would get us the financial backing to get the project going if we use 200,000 from this funding source. Do you have an issue with that?
As long as it doesn't hurt our bonding potential, I do not.
Okay. Well, that's actually money that we're saving. It's in our account. that we're saving. See, I took that wrong the last time we talked on how this money was coming through. So that's actually from where we're paying $800,000 bonds, now we're paying $400,000 bonds. So we have, and that's why I think that I feel very good about that, even though we're adding $600,000 if we take 200 out to our funding potential. We're not hurting our bonding potential. And we're still leaving money in there. We can use if we need it, or on other things, we've talked about that. But this will get this project done. Do you all have any other suggestions or questions or comments?
How's that go with it?
There you go.
I have a question.
If ma'am.
If we could, if they're gonna have to do all the fielding down there, and the coach says if you turn it this way, you're not gonna have that problem.
We have something we already have looked on that.
Geotechnical survey did not include turning it a different edge.
Geotech is in, the geotech will be drilling in that location for the softball field here soon. So we need to know if that's the location.
It was not turned that way, what we.
It wasn't turned that way when we asked.
I think cosmetically, I know the coach is trying to help save us some money on that too. Coach, you maybe you can say anything anytime you want. But I think cosmetically, it's probably look better lining with the field. Do you agree, disagree? What would you like?
I don't have an opinion on
Okay.
it. I'm just looking to say, I'm tired, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know he's trying to help us save some money. I know
I
he
think
is.
Tommy and Dr. Fletcher have been in enough meetings with me to realize that this stresses me, this kind of money. And I just want the taxpayers' money to be spent the best way it can be spent.
Well, I think the board believes this spent on our children is the best it can be spent.
I don't disagree with that.
And
I
that's
just,
up to
you know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of money to fill that up.
Yeah.
If I could offer an opinion, I think it functions better, the way that it's oriented, and I think aesthetically it's better, and it impacts the field less. I think, you know, as far as sites, I think if we just tweaked it a little bit to the north and pushed the entire building, we may be able to lessen the amount of field that we're doing on the south side of that site where it gets deeper as opposed to the north side.
Okay.
So I think as far as building location, I think the orientation is probably the right one. But if we moved it north, you know, a matter of a few feet or something, I think there could be some savings there as far as the amount.
There is a big difference in elevation.
Yeah, the further south you go, the more field you're gonna have, so.
Well, I'll be honest, I like it that way too, because I think in the future, we could even possibly blacktop some of this area for the kids who come down the park and those kinds of things in the future, at some point, you know. I know I'm kidding. But I mean, I see that this point is, you know, we could blacktop an area, just like that's this building, for them to come down and park and those kind of things. So anyway, I'm already spending your money, don't worry about it. Get a drink.
Yeah, I'm gonna drink for that one.
But if you can, you know, I don't think that would hurt anything, is if you move it up a little bit or back a little bit, whatever you have to do to save a little bit extra money. I don't think that's gonna hurt anything. You know, I think we can, with everybody's blessing and the board's approval, we can get this project going. We have 400,000, roughly a little bit extra maybe, and if we do 200,000 from here, we definitely have enough money to fund the project and fund it to where the rough end plumbing's in and all concrete is that one. But again, every dollar we save, saves the taxpayer dollar, and we're gonna push you to save it as much as possible. And I think a good structured bidding on this project will save us a pretty good amount. I don't think we'll see 600.
I would like to add that, just as a motion, if it pleases the board, that if we approve option one revised, when we get to that point, we still have some things to talk about, that we include the full concrete slab for the entire building. I think that's the best thing. That way that the entire facility can be used very quickly. We can do some other things to rub things in as we go through, but I do think we need to do that. Just what we.
Well, and I'll explain myself. That was a suggestion that I made to them to get in budget when I didn't, and we still don't know. We still have to ask. We don't know if there has to be a bathroom for a CO with a certificate of occupancy. If we have to have a bathroom for a certificate of occupancy to be able to use the building, then we might as well do it. If we don't have to, you can choose if you want to or not. But I'd like to see that area, I was figuring more of just where the bathrooms are, gravel. You know, make concession stands, so that way we can add that in later on, and get the locker room in there for coach, but that's the reason why that was a suggestion made. And I'll find out pretty quickly whether we have to do that to get CL. Okay.
And we are talking about doing option one, right?
Well, first we need to,
Revise.
Yeah.
And that's with the locker rooms and the bathrooms and the concession stand, everything.
that's for the flooring and the rough and plumbing for those, to get at our budget.
It's not finished.
It is not completely finished. At this time, that's for the rough end plumbing and for all the concrete, and we would have to have one bathroom if it is required. And then we're planning on trying to do the rest of it later, the walls and everything else later. Because it significantly jumps up when we do that. And talking with the coach and talking with other people, I don't think there's gonna be a problem being able to get some of those interior walls built and some of this other stuff done. So anyway, I'm ready if you are. We need to first approve the site option for the softball facility, which the site would that be option one on site?
I would just say the site would be,
First base site.
first base site. And, you know, we set 2 sites, but I'd like to have that approved by the board.
Do we have a motion to approve to use the site along first base site?
I make a motion.
Madeline makes a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Barb seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. First base. All right. Architectural design chosen, so we need a motion to approve the Lawrence County softball practice facility option 1 revised.
To include $20,000 additional. So
To include-
you could say $600,000 budget.
For a $600,000 budget.
Make that motion.
Jim makes the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, who was it?
Garner.
Garnet. Garnet seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Option
Is
1,
that a shout?
That's great.
600,000. Are you smiling at that, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Well, we're smiling too, because we want to do it for a long time. Okay, 2B2, well, we've already pretty much done this.
The only thing I'd like to say as far as the financing, we would say is the $400,000 from general fund, $200,000 from how do we need bonding or how do we need
Capital outlay would be,
From restricted building fund through a capital fund request.
okay.
From restricted building fund through a capital fund request.
And that would be $200,000 for that amount. So $400,000 general, $200,000 through capital funds request, through restricted capital funds request.
Do you know, I wonder if that should say up to 200, when a capital fund request is submitted, are they gonna want I guess they're gonna want estimates of.
Well, what we'll do is we'll say $200,000 total, we'll take it off general fund.
Yeah.
Whatever we need to adjust, we'll adjust it on general fund side.
Because we will, I heard you interrupt, we will need to do a revised BG1 showing that change in funding source. And I think we could probably do that at the December 20th board meeting with an updated BG1, because that's going to start the process with KDE, right?
We'll show it as a full 200,000, and then if the budget goes down, that's a good, if we want to get bids that goes down, that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
So I will put cash building fund, 200,000 on the BG1 that we have currently.
Yes, and
Because we have the 400,000 BG1 right now already there.
so at a future board meeting, you would approve that revised BG1,
Okay.
showing that $200,000 line item,
And just put a cash building fund and put it there.
and an agenda item for that same future board meeting would be to approve the capital fund request,
Okay.
that one-page form,
Mhm.
and then right afterwards, when you submit that new BG, copy or attach the capital funds request
Lincoln, if you wouldn't mind, could you send us the wording for that capital request so that we can make sure we get the BG one correct?
Yes.
I mean, that way there's no question, if you just give us the wording. So, motion for tonight is to use up to $200,000, I'm sorry, up to $400,000 general fund, $200,000 from restricted capital funds request.
Yes. And that motion's already been made and approved.
Who was that?
Jim?
Okay. All right.
It's not been,
This is-
I'll make a
this is
motion.
Well, this is, that's
Two
added
B, two A is what it is.
to be,
too
okay, I'm sorry.
And I'll
To be-
second.
So Madeline made the motion and Barb seconded. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. So 400 and 200. Okay. Everybody, we're good. All right, 2B3, district-wide safety and security upgrades project, SFCC expired funds, BG 22.231. Approve updated KEDC quotes for IP cameras for district-wide safety and security upgrades, project BG 22231. Tom, do you have something on that?
yeah. Yeah, so the price just went down. The original BG was for $464 or whatever. The original quote was like an estimate, and so the BG and that quote had to match, so I worked with the vendor and we got the price down to make that exact match.
Okay.
So just lowered the price for you by about $10,000.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Garnet makes a motion, we have a second. Jim seconds, all those in favor? Aye. See how we like him, he brings us lower quotes. I'm just throwing that out there for you guys. 2B4, LCHS.
I told him it was he increased his pay, but that's not really true.
Yeah, it's not true at all.
LCHS Vocational Education Center renovation and expansion BG 22146. 2B4A, approved agreement between owner and architect construction manager as advisor addition with Ross Tarrant Architects, Inc. for the Lawrence County LAVEC renovation and expansion BG 22146.
Okay.
Yes.
We were approved to use Ross Tarrant Architects as our architect, but this is the actual agreement between the owner, architect, and with us, so we had to have this approved by the board also.
Do we have a motion? Jim makes the motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Madeline seconds, all those in favor? Aye, motion carries. Before we cut out, thank you guys, we appreciate y'all coming all the way down here late night, you know. We do really appreciate you guys when we need you, y'all always do, we appreciate it.
Thanks
We
for
have a
having
motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Garnet makes a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
Barb seconds, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Congratulations.